Well, hello everybody, and welcome to another edition of Faster Masters Rowing Radio, where having a rowing coach only makes you better. Following a program gives you a true pathway to becoming a confident rower who's respected by your peers. Become the athlete you want to row with. I'm Rebecca Caroe, and I'm joined by Marlene Royle.
Hello, Rebecca, and hello to our Faster Masters this beautiful September day.
Well, there we go. And I can actually echo that and say we're having a beautiful spring day, which is always a nice place to be. I want to kick off with in our This Past Week section, where we usually talk about what we're doing to advocate for Masters Rowing. I've got a couple of really fun things that I've been working on, which I'm able to reveal to you now. So we have been approached over the years by other people who are in club administration or work in different rowing federations, and they say, you guys write good articles and you often explain things, coaching tips, and you have some really good things that you say. Can we use them? And we would love to say yes. So Marlene and I have been discussing how we can do this. And what we've done is we've built a page on the website called Advocacy, where people who are keen to help us spread the word about Masters Rowing and the practical things that different individuals, clubs, regional federations can do, can sign up to get a once a month article from us, where you can then have our full license to reproduce this wherever you see fit. And we have set this page up, and I will be sharing it in our newsletter this week. So it's a separate newsletter. If you're on our regular newsletter, you won't get these things, but we will then sign you up and you'll get once a month an article, and then it's up to you to do with it what you see fit. The only thing that Marlene and I ask is that you credit Faster Masters Rowing and you link back to our website when you use it. So if you want to share it on Facebook, that's cool. If you want to put it on your club website, that's cool. If you want to put it in your club newsletter, if there are some other places that we haven't thought of yet, we're really, really keen. So what we want to do is to enable other people who think that there is a conversation around Masters Rowing that's worth having, to have some resources at their disposal, which they can then use for their own little mission in this little bit of the rowing world where we have influence. So that's Rowing Advocacy, and we're going to get that sent out to you. So if you're listening and you're not yet on our regular newsletter, just go to the website, fastermastersrowing.com/newsletter, join the list, and we'll include all of the details in there. Have you done anything this week, Marlene?
I've been reading all the things you've been writing. So reviewing the advocacy page, yes, and in my own little sphere of rowing. I've been actually doing a lot to work on our program for the head of the Charles and getting things ready a little bit ahead of time, because as we get into late September, we're going to get into that final stage for our head of the Charles competition. So I've been working on some of that a little bit ahead of time this week.
Yeah. I've also been working on a slightly different rowing project, which is something that I do every year, and I'm sure many of you are already aware of. I write a book called Rowing Tales, and the Rowing Tales book is an anthology of really short chapters. Each is contributed by a different person. And I am right now doing a shout out for stories. So if you have a rowing tale that you would like to tell, please shoot it on over to me. I put the link in a newsletter that was sent earlier this week. Just email it to us via our website, fastermastersrowing.com. You can also record it. So if you have a voice recorder and you can make up an MP3 file, just send me the audio file and I'll get it transcribed. Importantly, you must tell me your name and your email address so that I can send you the final proof so that you can check it over and I haven't spelled names and place names wrong or people's names wrong or whatever. And I was discussing with a mutual friend about how rowers tell stories. And mostly, I think you'll agree that rowers nearly always swear at some point for emphasis when they're describing the wind was strong or whatever. And so I decided that I would recommend that we keep it family friendly, but that you would allow me as the editor to decide, if you include expletives, how to represent them in print. Because let's face it, the vast majority of stories I get have got one or two swear words in them.
Really? That's interesting.
Oh, yeah.
I would never guess that, but what do I know?
Think about it. You're standing on the bank of a lake watching some rowing with a friend, and you're talking, and one of you tells a story. Do you not find that often rowers swear?
I don't know. I never thought about it.
I find definitely I swear.
Depends how much they're drinking. Depends how much they're drinking. I think if they've had a few beers, it probably flows a little bit more. So,
In any event, we welcome all stories. Please understand, I can't print all of them, but I love hearing stories. And I've got a couple which have come from rowing fans, people who don't row, and how they got interested in watching the sport, which is a new one from me.
Yeah, that's a good topic too. Men don't wear lycra, right?
Now, just a quick shout out of thank you to our podcast supporters. We've got a few more in this month. People help us pay the costs of this podcast and show their appreciation by making a regular monthly donation to us. We are so grateful to all of you. If you feel that you've got any value from listening today, please go to fastermastersrowing.com/podcast and consider making a donation. They start from $1 a month. Now, we got a question in from a listener, Marlene, about integrating disparate rowing styles.
Okay, I'll read this. This comes from Donald Graf, who is in Norwich Rowing Club in the UK. Figuring out integration. The master's crews are very self-organized, which can make it a bit of a closed shop for new members, whether novice, returned to rowing, or just moved into the area. We have very strong singles and hence sculling squads, but sweep is challenging between divergent styles learnt at university and the impact of COVID having limited sweep crew outings. So he's asking our advice, like, how do you integrate people who, we're going to say in team boats, right, or sweep boats, who have really different styles and different backgrounds?
Yeah, so let's take them two parts of that question. The first is integrating people into a group, and then the second thing we'll talk about is the rowing style. So integrating new members is a really important job for the leadership of any rowing group. There is nothing worse, and I'm sure we can all recall how awkward you feel when you first show up and no one knows you and you don't know them, and you're pretty much waiting for someone to tell you what to do. And there's, even I find from one club to another, there's a lot of kind of how we do things round here, which is different. So little things like at my club, we boat from a pontoon. And we have a rule that when you take your oars out of the boathouse to put them on the pontoon, you never lay them on the pontoon. What you do is you put the tips on the bank and the handles on the pontoon so that there's the maximum amount of space on the pontoon for people to walk by so they don't tread on your equipment. Mm-hmm. Now, it's a really small point, but you can always tell if someone's come from a different club because they'll lay their blades parallel to the edge of the pontoon and you're like, I have to step over these.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And so, I would say when we have a new member, we're only singles, but this year we had a lot of new members. So we actually, when you join as a new member, I give them a welcome lesson. And so the welcome lesson is an orientation around how things are set up, how the boats are numbered and which oars go with which boats and how the boats go in the rack. And then we actually show them like how to take this, because some of them don't have experience, some of them might, but you know, how we take the boats out, where we put the oars, And then we give them a brief overview. It's not a complete learn to row by any means, but we get them in the boat, get a little bit of an idea of how physically fit they are, how well does somebody follow directions, what's their level of coordination, and then we advise which group to go in so that they can start to take some group lessons before they can go out on their own.
That's really interesting. So you actually do a brief fitness and sort of physical assessment of them without them realizing. Yeah. And you have to feed that back to the club committee?
No, I feed it back to me because, well, I am the club committee at the moment. So since I run all the groups, but if we have, as the club grows and we have, say, other coaches teaching other sessions, whoever does the welcome lesson will then recommend, well, we can have them start in this group because, some groups might be a little bit more advanced scholars, some groups might be intermediate. One group or time will tend to be a little bit more the novice group, or a group that moves a little bit slower. So it's in terms of what speed people move at and how you can keep them together in the groups, because it's not necessarily 100% skill level, but more, can you keep them together in the groups? And does this person need a little bit more one-on-one at first before they can come into a group, or they're going to be pretty comfortable, we can get them right in a group and working on skills. So we actually have what I call it a welcome lesson, which, we spend 45 minutes and go through these things and try to give them an overview of how things work.
Yeah, we definitely find when we have members who are joining who rowed earlier in their lives, and I call them returning rowers, their perception of skill level, you go, how much rowing did you do? And it's a little bit hard to say, did you win anything? So we don't tend to do that. We say, can you sweep? Can you scull? What sides? And then what we do before they join is they get 2 free outings with us before we ask for any money. And we make a experienced member of the club go out in a boat with them and sit behind them and watch them row, so that you just can come back and go, yeah, they've got it basic, but, they're a little rusty, or, there are things that they can't do physiologically. That's when you find out that they have had a replacement hip, or they're looking for a hip replacement, or whatever it is. And that's really helpful for our committee. The other thing we do when someone has joined is, I think I've talked before about our Saturday sessions being, we call them the jamming session, where it's very inclusive and everyone mixes up skills, abilities, sexes into combined boats. For the first time that they do a session like that, afterwards, I always say to them in the group with their people who they've been in the crew with, trade phone numbers so that you can stay in touch with each other and arrange to go out together during the week if you'd like to. And this is, while they're maybe considering whether they want to join us. So we haven't yet put them onto the Fit Club calendar, which is where we can book outings, and just sort of then getting them to come to the cafe afterwards. And then that's a chance just to chat and to listen to the chatter of the group. And I think it helps people relax.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now let's move on to how to integrate different techniques, because this is much more challenging. You've recruited someone, it's lovely to have them. And my understanding from the question is that he feels that sculling technique is more uniform, but sweep technique sounds like it's a little more divergent. Where do you start?
Well, I think the mindset is the first place to start, because first of all, if you have 8 people in a boat and the people who are rowing in the boat realize that we have some very different people in the boat, you have to take a look at who's in the boat. And obviously, if somebody has a shorter stroke and some people have a very longer stroke, the person with the shorter stroke is not going to be able to match the person with the longer stroke. So the people with the longer strokes might have to adapt a little bit. So I think you have to make an agreement as a crew that first we agree that we're going to set our finish position so that everybody is coming out the same, or we're going to focus on our finish position to the hands away. Or I think, I think you have to decide as a crew where you're going to match right from the beginning so that there's a starting point.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And I agree in general, the finish position is an easy place to start. And in fact, we have marked on the side, on the deck of the boat with just permanent marker, a couple of measurements. And we measure back from square off on the pin. So we measure back 58 centimeters, 60 centimeters, and 62 centimeters, where 58 is probably the shortest that we would use. You can go shorter than that if you've got a uniform crew of people who are not very tall. So maybe I'm talking 5'5" But if most of your crew are between 5'6" and 5'10", most women can easily row to 58. Most of them can also row to 60. Bear in mind, of course, this depends on your span and the length of your oars as well, but it makes it very easy to fix up to the same place. I think that's a great suggestion.
Yeah, you have to have some starting point, because obviously people are going to have different body angles. They're going to have different arm lengths. Probably the next step I would go would be getting people from the finish, from the release to arms and body away at the same time. So the knees start to come up at the same time. That would probably be the next progression.
And a good drill to do that is a pauses. Just really simple, row 3 strokes, pause. Have we all paused at the same place? And then do a variation of that, particularly for sweep, where a lot of times people forget which hand feathers and which one doesn't. And so doing those pauses with only one hand on the oar, your outside hand on the oar, is a great way to do it. You don't have to instantly say you've only row with one hand. You can have your feathering hand flat like this, just resting on top of the oar shaft. So row square blades and just have the hand resting there, just it's not being gripped. And that helps people to make sure that the tap down is being done by the correct hand. And then you can switch, take the outside hand off. And my recommendation for that is to put it behind your back or to hold the back of the seat, just with a lightly touch it with your finger so that you know when the seat is moving, you can tell. And then again, you do the pause, but you're doing it feathered. And you just make sure that that hand is doing the correct job. And then your outside hand can then be flat on top of the blade while the inside does the feathering. And then your outside hand can grip, and they have to check that the inside hand's still feathering. What next?
In terms of integrating our style, again, everybody has to prepare their blades at the same rate. So that's another thing that's, in a single, you might have different speeds to roll up your blades to have them ready to enter the water. But in the boat, in a team boat, everybody has to do the same thing. So I think you have to come, again, just like you have the markings where to set the foot stretchers, have some reference point that everybody agrees on when you start to prepare the blade to get it ready to place in the water, because that's going to be another important factor to lead everybody to the water together. And I think those who are very tall and longer than other members in the crew, are going to have to compromise a little bit and work for the sake of the crew working together. I mean, there's a little bit of give and take here where the boat has to move as a whole. And if that means that some really tall people have to row 3/4 slide, that might be the way it is for that particular outing. But, people just have to be able to be in and out of the water together and work at a similar length, or the boat's it's just going to be miserable for everybody. You want people to have a good row. And so there's got to be give and take to row the boat the best that you can given the crew. And so it does take cooperation. Nobody can insist that it's going to be their way.
I think that all of these things can also be done every outing during the warm-up. So even if you have different lineups, it's really helpful just to refresh everybody in the warm-up what we're doing and how we're doing it. So instead of just doing your regular pick drill of short slide work, integrate these drills into your warm-up. So you might not do the short slide work. You might go straight into rowing half slide, for example, and start doing the work with the different hands. And that will be a really good thing to do just as people are warming up. They can then start to get those accurate. And you can remember, you can also row 4s and 6s and cycling through them while you're warming up. That gives even more opportunity for more people to set the stroke rate, because if stern pair aren't rowing, you get 5 and 6 as stroking the boat, and just make sure that they can pick up exactly the same rhythm.
Now, I was just thinking about this, Rebecca. What if you have a situation, say we have an 8, and we have 4 people who are fairly tall and 4 people who are, say, a medium height or a little bit less? Would it make sense to put them bow 4, stern 4? So if you were doing alternating work, they might have similar lengths, or do we assume that everybody's rowing all 8 all the time? That's another, it's just another possible way, depending on what you plan for the session. If you're doing a technical session, you could boat people tall stern 4 and medium bow 4. That is one way that you could do that if you were going to do a lot of work by 4s. So it depends a little bit on the type of outing that you're planning as well.
That's true. And also my preference is to always have a 3 and 4. If you're planning an outing where you're going to do a lot of work in 4s and 6s, make sure at 3 and 4 you have people who are skilled at blade work, regardless of their height, because bow pair have to follow them. So your 4 person particularly needs to be rhythmic and skillful. And I personally don't worry too much about height when you're doing that sort of an exercise. Certainly height comes into it a little bit more when you're doing a racing crew, I think, that's going to be rowing regularly together. Mm-hmm. But my preference would be to focus more on their individual blade work skills at the early stages. Nice work. So Donald, I hope that helps you along, and best wishes for Norwich Rowing Club. And I know you've got a head race coming up later on in the autumn, and I've done that in the past, parked myself magnificently in a tree on the edge of the river. It's a really good head. You have to row all the way down the Yar, which is the river, to the start point, and then you race back, and it's a really long head race from memory.
That sounds like fun.
It is fun. I love head racing.
Me too.
Our big topic for today, though, is shoulder lifting. This is, again, driven by a question that we had in from... Have you got the question printed? Or did we just... I think we just...
No, we just talked about how to identify and fix shoulder lifting.
Yeah.
I don't have the full question.
It's a common situation where you're watching a crew row, and what you see is someone who comes off the front end, and the first thing they do is swing their shoulders rather than drive their legs. So Marlene, firstly, how do you, as a coach or someone who's in the crew, how do you spot whether this is happening?
Well, a couple of things you can look for. One, you can look for what happens to their shoulders. You can look at what happens to their handle. Is their handle moving up instead of horizontal? Is their blade going deep as soon as they put pressure on the blade? One of the things that I look for, because we want them getting pressure off the footboard with the legs, is I look for the sense of pushing the knees, the legs down, holding the body angle a little bit longer. So I look for, are the knees moving away from the chest, or is the chest lifting away from the knees? Okay, if the chest is lifting away from the knees, the upper body is going to go up because the legs are too slow.
So why is this a bad thing? Why do we prefer, I'm not saying bad, that's the wrong word. Why would we prefer that people didn't do this?
Well, one, we want to use our bigger muscles first, and our bigger muscles are our leg drive. So if we're going sequentially, and Rebecca always says you can only use each muscle group once. So if you don't use the legs and you bring in the body early, you're not going to have the body for the swing mid-drive because your body swing has already started early. But the more important thing is that you're giving up the huge strength of the legs. And if the legs don't go first and the body comes in, you're not able to use your legs properly once the body's starting to open. So it's, the power sequence of going from strongest to weakest muscles, but also keeping the drive horizontal. So if you want to have a nice long stroke and hold the pressure on the blade as long as you can, if the blade is at the same level and staying horizontal, that's going to stay in the water a longer time. Whereas if you lift the handle and the tip of the blade goes deep, so if the blade goes down and then comes up, you're shortening the horizontal time that the blade is in the water. So that's also going to shorten your drive time.
So we've worked out how to identify that shoulder lifting is happening. Now for the much harder thing, which is how do you correct it? Where do you start?
Well, I think first is if somebody's lifting with their shoulders, there might be that one, there's the body opening up, but there also might be that they hold too much tension in the traps. That's a common thing. The shoulders come up and your shoulders up closer to your ears. That's not the muscle group that we want to connect and stabilize to connect our body to the handle. So to make that connection between the legs and the handle, you have to hold the lats really strong, which are, if you draw your shoulder blades down on your rib cage, you're going to feel under your arms how that muscle spreads. And that's a really important connection for connecting. When you drive your legs in seat, you want to affect that pressure on the handle. So you've got to have a really strong connection in your lats, which are very strong muscles in your back, and they cover the entire length of your back. If you lift, that pressure is coming up into your traps. So it's also going to create an unstable shoulder that way. And you are probably not going to have a very good connection to the handle either. So your pressure on the foot stretcher and your pressure on the handle might not be equal. And you want that pressure's got to go together.
I certainly agree with that. And generally speaking, when I'm trying to guide someone towards how to move in a different way, is I usually start by getting them to do a drill which is called legs only rowing. Mm-hmm. And it is very simple. You roll up to the catch, put the oar in the water, and leaving your body in the forward position and leaving your arms straight, you just straighten your legs. And when your legs are straight, take the oar out of the water. That's the end of that stroke. And when I'm teaching people how to do this, I often start by having them do it with the blade feathered and just running along the surface of the water so that there's no load. And all they have to focus on is keeping their torso very still. But it's really important to set this up accurately from the very beginning so the athlete understands what you're trying to do. So in the setup, we have the boat stationary. I get people to start at the finish. So they are leaning backwards, handle next to your chest, whether you're sweep or sculling, it makes no difference. I then get them to leave the blade feathered on the surface of the water so that the handle is going to be at the right height for the drive phase. This is also important, referencing Marlene's early point about people lifting their handles too much and the blade tip going too deep. So the blade is at the handle's at the correct height for the drive phase. And you start by saying, keep leaning back, straighten your arms. Now, rock your body forward, keep the blade on the surface of the water. And then I get them to roll to half slide, then to 3/4 slide, and then to their catch position. And all the time the blade is resting on the surface of the water. And then I say, right, just straighten your legs. So this is my hand pretending to be my legs. And when your legs are straight, we're all going to roll back to the catch and straighten the legs. And you just get them doing this rhythmically. Up. I would say, watch your knees. They come up and then they go down. After a while, when they can do that rhythmically, Then the next time they get to the catch, I'm going to say, when you're going to stop when you get to the catch, square the blade. And now keep on doing it. So the focus from their brain point of view is all on the legs. Straighten the legs, take the oar out of the water, back to the catch, straight, place the blade in the water, straighten the legs. And I think that that helps to train the legs to work on their own.
Mm-hmm.
Because that is mainly, I think, the thing that people neglect. If their tendency to shoulder lift, they're not activating their legs, and the legs aren't used to working without leveraging off their back.
Right. Yes. Norm Graf, who coached me many years ago, and he was the director at Craftsbury for several years. He had a great image of holding the grapefruit. So when you were in your body forward position, and in the position when you're putting the blade in the water, he said, well, imagine you're holding a grapefruit right there. And as you start to drive your legs, you want to take that grapefruit with you for a few inches. And I always thought that that was a really great image of using a Nerf ball or something. But, you know, you want to hold that angle a little bit longer so the legs can get into the leg drive before you start to swing. And then people will say, well, how do I know when to swing? That transition is relative to keeping pressure on the blade. So if you're trying to keep a steady pressure on the blade, you're going to feel when you need to swing to have the body come into the end of the leg drive and then transition to the arms, because you're trying to hold that pressure on the blade consistently. And if you wait too long, that transition isn't going to happen very, very smoothly.
Yeah, and I think that that is a real finesse. And it is one of the things that people forget, particularly people who have rowed in their youth and are then coming back to it. It's one of the key things that you forget about the sport. And you do have to relearn it. And I personally find it actually quite challenging. And I have to keep reminding myself that this is, you know, what you need to do. But that consistent pressure is really hard to teach. And so in general, I don't try and teach it at the early stages while people are still figuring out this legs only piece. And the progression from the legs only rowing drill is then to row legs and backs only, leaving your arms straight, so straight arm rowing. And usually when I teach this, I teach it as an exaggeration so that I get people to drive their legs fully straight before they swing their back. So it's a bit of a two-part stroke, to be honest. But what generally happens is as they're doing the drill, they work out when to swing their back. Yeah. They think they're waiting till the legs are straight, but
right. They'll feel when they need to pick that up in a somewhat natural way. But you know, when the shoulders are lifting, I mean, shoulders can also lift this way. They can go up near your ears, and as we said, that's your lats are letting go. Your lats are not stable. So you have to think about keeping what we talk about packed shoulders. So packed shoulders are like keeping your shoulder blades down in your pockets. And so if you're keeping your shoulder blades down in your pockets, that's going to create a strong connection so that you don't have slippage in the shoulders. If your traps are up and if you're getting sore up in your neck, that's an indication that you're taking the pressure too high. So then you want to try to bring that pressure down, like underneath your arms. So Cece calls them, you're using your flying squirrel muscles, right? Or your cobra back. You know, you want to feel like your back is wide. And if you put your hand underneath your armpit and then you just draw your shoulder blade down, you'll feel that muscle expand, and that's your lat, and that's the muscle that you want to use to stabilize your shoulder. So if that pressure is lifting, it's going to tend to climb up high, and you're probably taking more stress higher in your back as well, versus bringing that pressure down closer to your lower back and your hips. So blade depth drills are also really good for working on this. And looking at your blade, doing circles watching that your blade is staying level, because if you're lifting, the blade's going to go deep. So that's another way. So like doing some blade work drills in combination with legs only, legs, body only. Those things help you stay horizontal and keep the blade horizontal, because you have to have some flexibility in your shoulders, that when you do swing your shoulders, you don't lift the handle up, because your shoulders do come up a little bit and come down, but you still have to keep the blade level. So
it's subtle, isn't it?
There's
a lot to it.
It is.
Now, before we wrap up, I would like to show you the beautiful photograph that I was sent in this week by Maria Teresa Indiveri. And this looks like they're rowing on the ocean. She doesn't say where it is, but isn't that a great picture?
Yeah.
So thank you very much for sharing that on the Masters Rowing International Facebook group. That was a delight to see this week. And a really unusual shot. So thank you to everybody who's been with us today. It's been lovely, as ever, to have our live listeners with us, but also it was fun last week to have our European listeners. And I forgot South Africa, because I should say that people in the European time zone, because of course that European time zone rolls right down to South Africa. So it was lovely. We had a live listener from Bedford and another from South Africa, out from memory, and a few others. So we're going to continue that first week of the month. We're going to do our podcast earlier so that our European listeners have a chance to listen live. Any final words, Marlene?
No, I think it's go out and practice, stay horizontal, keep working on that drive sequence, and you'll help your boat go faster.
So this has been Faster Masters Rowing Radio, the show dedicated to masters athletes who want fun, fitness, and confidence in their rowing. You can become a student of the sport by buying a Faster Masters Rowing program subscription today at fastermastersrowing.com/join. And we very much look forward to seeing everybody next time. Bye-bye.